In 1633, the Inquisition forced Galileo Galilei to recant the heliocentric worldview, which sees the sun rather than the earth as the center of the universe. This affair is often seen as an attack by religion on science. But was it really? Let's see what really happened. On January 7, 1610, Galileo observed 3 small stars close to Jupiter with his telescope. Observations over the following nights showed that the positions of these stars were changing relative to Jupiter, which would have been inexplicable if they had actually been fixed stars. On January 10th, Galileo noticed that one of them had disappeared, which he attributed to it being hidden behind Jupiter. Within a few days, he concluded that they orbited Jupiter. Galileo had indeed discovered 3 of Jupiter's 4 largest moons. He also discovered the 4th a little later, on January 13th. Galileo called the group of 4 moons the Medici stars, but later astronomers renamed them Galilean moons in honor of their discoverer. Today they are called Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto. Shortly afterwards, Galileo Galilei observed with his telescope that Venus shows phases, although it always remains close to the sun in the Earth's sky. This was an indication that it orbits the sun and not the Earth, as the heliocentric model of Copernicus predicted, and for Galileo, this discovery disproved the geocentric model that was common at the time. That same year, Galileo published his work Sidereus Nuncius, in English it means star messenger, in which he described his observations. Galileo's discoveries met with opposition in the Catholic Church. In February 1616, the Inquisition asked a commission of theologians known as qualifiers to give their opinion on the claims of the heliocentric view of the universe. The qualifiers delivered their unanimous report on February 24th, stating that the claim that the sun was immobile at the center of the universe was philosophically absurd and unreasonable, since it explicitly contradicts the sense of Holy Scripture in many points. The claim that the Earth moved and was not at the center of the universe received a similar assessment. On February 26th, Galileo was ordered by Cardinal Bellarmine to abandon the Copernican views and to stop teaching, defending, or discussing them. Galileo's contributions caused difficulties for theologians and natural philosophers of the time because they contradicted scientific and philosophical ideas based on those of Aristotle and Ptolemy and closely associated with the Catholic Church. In particular, Galileo's observations of the phases of Venus, which showed that it orbits the Sun, and the observation of moons orbiting Jupiter contradicted the geocentric model of Ptolemy, which was supported by the Roman Catholic Church and supported the Copernican model proposed by Galileo. In 1632, Galileo published a dialogue concerning the 2 largest world systems, which defended the heliocentric model and was very popular. The book was presented in the form of a dialogue between 3 people, a supporter of the heliocentric theory, a supporter of the geocentric theory, and a neutral observer. Although Galileo attempted to present the dialogue as a neutral presentation of the arguments of both sides, it was interpreted by many as an obvious defense of the heliocentric theory. Galileo used the dialogue style to present the arguments for the heliocentric view by pitting a characteristic exponent of that view against a less informed proponent of the geocentric theory. The main problem with the dialogue, from the perspective of the Church and the Inquisition, was that it was seen as a direct violation of the Prohibition of 16, which prohibited Galileo from teaching or defending the Copernican theory as truth. This led to Galileo being accused and put on trial. The matter was complicated because Pope Urban VIII had initially supported Galileo and allowed him to write about the Copernican theory as long as he treated it as a hypothesis. However, after the publication of Dialogues 1632, the support was terminated. With the loss of many of his defenders in Rome, Galileo 1633 was eventually viewed as a dangerous maverick and tried by order on suspicion of heresy. Galileo was found guilty, and the Inquisitio's verdict consisted of 3 main parts. Galileo was found vehemently suspected of heresy, namely of having held the views that the sun lies motionless at the center of the universe, that the Earth is not at the center and moves, and that one can hold and defend an opinion as probable after it has been declared to be contrary to Holy Scripture. He was ordered to abjure, curse, and abhor these views. Galileo was subsequently sentenced to imprisonment by the Inquisition. The next day, this was commuted to house arrest, under which he spent the rest of his life. His dialogue was banned, and in an action not announced during the trial, publication of his works was prohibited, including any he might write in the future. After the conviction, Galileo was allowed to return to his villa in Arcetri near Florence, where he spent the rest of his life under house arrest. He continued his work on mechanics and published a scientific book in Holland in 1638. The Galileo trial has given rise to various interpretations and positions over time. Here are some of them. The traditional Catholic view. Some Catholic perspectives view the trial as a necessary action by the Church to defend the faith and authority of the Bible against a scientific theory that was seen as challenging. They often emphasize that Galileo's teachings did not have sufficient empirical evidence at the time, and that the Church was ultimately right to condemn him. Paul Feyerabend also argues similarly. Paul Feyerabend, an Austrian philosopher, interprets the Galileo trial as a case in which the Church acted more rationally than Galileo himself. He argues that the Church at the time was not dogmatic and accepted scientific knowledge, but demanded precise evidence. Feyerabend criticizes Galileo for despising those who did not share his mathematical thinking, and emphasizes the importance of the experimental method, which was better understood by Cardinal Bellarmine. In 1992, Pope John Paul II officially acknowledged that the conviction of Galileo was a mistake. He stated that theologians of the time were unable to separate science from biblical interpretation, and that they were mistaken in their actions against Galileo. Pope John Paul II emphasized in his address that Galileo, as a devout Catholic and a brilliant scientist, was ultimately rehabilitated. He was recognized as the victim of a misunderstanding between scientific progress and theological doctrine. He also emphasized in his address that Galileo, as a devout Catholic and a brilliant scientist, was ultimately rehabilitated. He was recognized as the victim of a misunderstanding between scientific progress and theological doctrine. The modern scientific view. From a scientific perspective, the Galileo trial is often cited as an example of the conflict between religious dogma and scientific freedom of knowledge. Many see Galileo as a victim of an intolerant institution that tried to defend its authority by suppressing an innovative scientific theory. Today, Galileo Galilei is revered by the public as an outstanding scientist and a courageous champion of truth. His discoveries and his commitment to the heliocentric worldview revolutionized our understanding of the universe. Despite persecution and condemnation by the Church, Galileo remained true to his convictions and sacrificed much for the freedom of scientific research. His life and work are an inspiring testament to the tireless human spirit and the unstoppable desire for knowledge. His legacy reminds us to always remain curious and seek the truth, no matter what obstacles we face. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to our channel for many more exciting history videos. Until next time.